Hi there, welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles in Washington, and we begin with breaking news and a major setback for the Justice Department's prosecution of two of President Trump's political opponents. A federal judge today dismissing the cases against former FBI Director James Comey and current New York Attorney General Letitia James. U.S. District Judge Cameron Curry ruling that the government's top prosecutor in those cases, acting U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, who is a former personal attorney to Donald Trump, has been serving in her post unlawfully. That means the indictments that Halligan secured against the New York AG for mortgage fraud and against Comey for allegedly making a false statement to Congress and obstructing a congressional investigation are null and void. Both Comey and James pleaded not guilty to their charges. The White House saying in a statement that the facts of the indictment haven't changed, and moments ago vowing to appeal today's dismissal.
Lindsay Halligan was legally appointed, and that's the administration's position. I know there was a judge who is clearly trying to shield Letitia James and James Comey from receiving accountability, and that's why they took this unprecedented action to throw away the indictments against these two individuals. But the Department of Justice will be appealing very soon, and it is our position that Lindsay Halligan is extremely qualified for this position, but more importantly, was legally appointed to it.
Comey also responding, acknowledging that his legal fight is not over while maintaining his innocence.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence, and a reflection of what the Department of Justice has become under Donald Trump, which is heartbreaking. But I was also inspired by the example of the career people who refused to be part of this travesty. I know that Donald Trump will probably come after me again, and my attitude is going to be the same. I'm innocent, I am not afraid, and I believe in an independent federal judiciary, the gift from our founders that protects us from a would-be tyrant.
Letitia James, meanwhile, said in a statement, quote, "I am heartened by today's victory and grateful for the prayers and support that I've received from around the country. I remain fearless in the face of these baseless charges as I continue fighting for New Yorkers every single day." Joining me now, NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach, NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, and defense attorney and NBC News legal analyst Misty Maris. All right, Gary, let's start with you. What was the basis for Judge Curry's decision?
So this is all about something called the 120-day rule. So there's 120 days between the time that a U.S. attorney is appointed and the time that they must be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, or they have to get out of the job if they're not continued on by a district court judge. With Eric Siebert, he was the original person that was put in the position by President Trump when he first took office in January. He left his job after not wanting to prosecute people like James Comey and Letitia James, and the president appointed Lindsay Halligan. That 120-day rule does not restart with Lindsay Halligan, and that is what this judge found today, that it continues and that she was unlawfully appointed on September 22nd, and therefore her indictment, James Comey, on the 25th, is unlawful.
So that does seem like a technicality. It's not necessarily about the merits of the case, but kind of the process. What happens now? Are there more options for the Department of Justice here?
So as you saw Caroline Levitt say just minutes ago, they are going to appeal this, it does seem. But what's interesting is that we went back and looked at some of the court records of all of the indictments that Lindsay Halligan has brought since September 22nd. And it turns out there are only two where she was the only person who signed it. It was Letitia James and James Comey. So there are several other indictments that she's made in the past few months that are signed by other people in the office, which means they also agreed with the indictment and those charges, and those will continue on. It's the two people that we're talking about today that won't.
So how does the appeal play itself out?
So this goes to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and so this will be heard on the merits. I'm sure sometime tonight we'll get an emergency stay to that Fourth Circuit. Of course, this could potentially end up at the Supreme Court.
And of course, there is this statute of limitations, which was really just days before when the charges were handed down. The statute of limitations was about to expire. The fact that this indictment's been thrown out, does that prevent them from being able to bring another indictment against him?
So there's a real technicality here. It's called U.S. Code 3288, which if you're not familiar with that, you'd be forgiven. It says in part, quote, whenever an indictment or information charging a felony is dismissed for any reason after the period prescribed by the applicable statute of limitations has expired, a new indictment may be returned within 6 calendar months of the dismissal of the indictment. So that means 6 calendar months from today, an indictment could be brought. This is something that is absolutely going to play out in the courts because this is not something that happens very often. So this is certainly a novel legal theory and one that we'll see what happens over the next few months.
Okay, and what could this mean for the broader big picture of several of these indictments that appear to be political motivated?
So you're seeing this across the country with the U.S. attorneys that have been perhaps unlawfully appointed. You're seeing it in New Jersey with Alina Habba. You're seeing it in Nevada, in California, all over the country. And what happened here is going to be used as an example in those other states.
Okay, Misty, let's bring you in now and talk about it from the perspective of your legal expertise. Both James Comey and Letitia James have other pending motions from their cases. They argue that they were selective and vindictive prosecutions. Will those motions still stand even if these dismissals are overturned?
So these motions at this point are actually moot. They have no bearing because the basis of this decision is that Lindsay Halligan's appointment was invalid, and therefore those indictments are void. So from a technical legal perspective, those motions don't exist because the case doesn't exist. I would expect that if the case is resurrected, remember, this was a dismissal without prejudice, and Gary laid out some of the potential paths, the appellate path, as well as potentially attempting to refile in that 6-month window. Those motions are likely to be resurrected at this time. But at this point, there's no way the judge is going to decide them since technically those indictments do not exist. They are voided by the fact that Halligan's appointment was invalid.
And talk to us about the significance about the fact that the judge dismissed them without prejudice. What does that mean?
So that means it leaves a door open. If this has been with prejudice determination, the case is over, it's done, it can never come back. But because it's without prejudice, it leaves an opening for the Department of Justice to try and, number one, potentially cure the issue. So this would be what they're saying is a procedural issue. The 120 days expired, but that Halligan is in fact qualified and therefore her appointment should stand. So this would be the issue on appeal. Now, if they were to be successful on that point, the question then becomes whether or not they're barred by statute of limitations when it comes to Comey, refiling when it comes to Letitia James. So all of these things are going to be at play. But because it's without prejudice, that is absolutely a critical factor here. There are avenues to continue to pursue these cases against Comey and James.
Okay, but what about Lindsay Halligan? If a judge is saying that she was unlawfully put in the position as acting U.S. attorney, can she continue to serve in that capacity?
She cannot. So her appointment right now is invalid. And what the court order says is that it's now up to the Eastern District of Virginia. It's up to the court to appoint that interim U.S. attorney. So there will be a lot of decisions to be made because one of these factors is while this appeal plays out, this case is going to be in legal limbo. But we know that before this case was ever brought, reporting indicates that other prosecutors did not want to bring the case, that they did not feel there was enough evidence. So will we see a situation where in their prosecutorial discretion, they choose not to bring it? It really depends on which path plays out. You know, right now, we expect to see an appeal. You're going to see that stay. You're going to see that appellate issue likely an ask to be expedited and potentially reaching the Supreme Court. But as of now, the authority to appoint an interim attorney, a U.S. attorney, lies with the court, not the executive branch.
And Gary raised a good point here. If you were representing a client being tried in the Eastern District of Virginia right now, and there were a number of cases that were being filed under Halligan's purview, would you be filing a motion to have your case dismissed right now? Would you have any standing there?
Definitely, because your argument would be that her appointment was invalid, and therefore the exact same conclusion that the court came to in this case is that the indictment itself was void. So I know Gary said there's only 2 indictments where Halligan was the only U.S. attorney. That is going to be the cases that will be at issue, the ones where she was the only one presiding. Now, any case around the country, and I think there's several U.S. attorneys who are under the same scrutiny as far as process for their interim appointments, like Alina Habba. This is another case that bolsters that taking action on that front in any jurisdiction, in any federal jurisdiction where that issue is at play.
Okay, Misty, thank you for that. Obviously, a very important day in the courtroom. Let's turn now to Yamiche, who's at the White House. Yamiche, we got the legal response to all this. Let's talk about the political response. What's the White House saying?
The White House is really doubling down on these indictments. And of course, we should all remind folks that they came after President Trump publicly pressured Attorney General Mamdani to go after what he views as his political enemies, naming a number of people, including Letitia James and James Comey. So the White House officials I've been talking to have been putting out this idea that these cases are not changing, that they do expect to appeal, that nothing has changed other than the fact that they have to redouble their efforts. I think, as Gary and Misty pointed out, this is dismissed without prejudice, which means that the federal government can bring these charges again. So the White House here is feeling like they're still on firm ground to be able to bring these charges. And in some ways, they're going after the judge. You heard the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, say that the White House believes that Lindsay Halligan has been appointed rightfully and legally. So they are going to absolutely be going going forward with an appeals process.
Have they said, though, how soon that could happen? And at what point would we expect this? And also, are they going to fight to keep Lindsay Halligan in that role?
Those are good questions. We're not exactly sure of the timing, but White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says that this is going to happen pretty soon. So we should imagine maybe today, maybe tomorrow. The White House has been pretty fast when it comes to appealing decisions that it does not like, including going to the Supreme Court if needed to appeal decisions. So I imagine that that's what they're going to do. And I also imagine that Lindsay Halligan, who is, of course, also a former personal attorney to President Trump, someone that he knows, someone that he handpicked to be in that office, that he's going to want to try to keep her in that position if he can. Ryan.
Okay. And Misty, let's go back to you quickly before we go. I mean, how does the statute of limitations apply throughout all of these cases?
So this is really important, especially when it comes to Comey. Remember that indictment came in just on the eve of when the statute of limitations was going to expire. So Gary referenced this rarely used law that allows for prosecutors to bring the case back within 6 months. That's generally used in the rare instances where there's a procedural defect. Comey's team is arguing this isn't a procedural defect. It is void. So this is a bit of a different argument that they will be raising when it comes to the impact of the statute of limitations to say, even if Lindsay Halligan is reinstalled as U.S. attorney, even if the appeal is successful, that the Department of Justice still, under no circumstances, can resurrect these charges against Comey. A novel legal issue that we'll see play out in this case.
Okay, there is a lot of moving parts related to this that is going to have to play out here over the next 6 months or so. Yamiche, you're going to stick around with us. Gary and Misty, thank you both for getting us started on this breaking news. But coming up, we're going to dive deeper into the political fallout for the president and Republicans to the dismissal of these indictments as the party also struggles on affordability issues. And the president again lashes out at a group of Democrats calling for their imprisonment. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. It is the beginning of Thanksgiving week, and Gobble and Waddle, the turkeys who will be pardoned by President Trump, have arrived here in Washington, D.C. But while the Trump administration is trying to paint a rosy picture of the economy ahead of the holiday, many Americans are feeling the pinch at the grocery store and facing sticker shock on health insurance, with Congress yet to find a solution to the expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. On Meet the Press this weekend, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent previewed a coming health care plan from the administration and argued that the White House is making progress on all those all-important issues surrounding affordability.
Now we are starting to see the affordability. The prices get better. We had a very big October for home sales. Energy prices, gasoline is down. We saw, we believe healthcare is going to come down. We will see an announcement this coming week on that. And so across the board, prices are starting to come down. And Kristen, the one thing that we're not going to do is do what the Biden administration did and tell the American people they don't know how they feel. They are traumatized, and over the Biden inflation, we have slowed inflation, and we are working very hard to bring it down.
But new polling suggests voters have a different view. 60% of Americans say that President Trump describes prices and inflation as better than they actually are, according to a new CBS News YouGov poll, with 65% saying his policies are making the price of food and groceries go up. Nearly the same percentage also disapproving of the president's handling of the economy overall. Rising food prices are just one piece of the puzzle. As you heard, the Treasury Secretary Bessent, Republicans are working on a plan to blunt the political impact of the rising cost of health care. potentially looking to extend the ACA tax credits that were at the center of last month's historically long government shutdown and incorporate a way to provide some of those funds directly to enrollees. Joining me now from outside the White House once again is NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, and on Capitol Hill is our senior national political reporter, Sahil Kapoor. Yamiche, last week President Trump posted that the only plan he would support would be one that would send money directly to Americans. What's being floated now doesn't seem to directly mesh with that. Has something changed, or are they still trying to figure this out?
They're still trying to figure this out, which is remarkable because it has been almost a decade since the president has been going after the Affordable Care Act and saying that he wanted to repeal and replace it. Today, the White House press secretary said that the topic of health care comes up, quote, very frequently and very robustly around the White House, and that the president is very involved in that. But when she said, when she talked about the details of that plan, she said she was going to leave that to the president to discuss. And we know the president, during a debate with former Vice President Harris, at one point said he had concepts of a plan, but so far there has not been a concrete plan. There's been some reporting floating out there about a possible plan that the White House might be putting out at some point, but so far we just have not seen any details, which is again just remarkable when you think about this issue, Ryan.
And does the administration see health care closely tied to this larger issue of affordability?
That's what it sounds like. When you talk to White House officials, I've talked to a number of them about this, they talk about healthcare as, of course, being one of the most expensive parts of Americans' lives. So many people in this country, they are fearful about getting sick because that could bankrupt families. We've heard so many horror stories of insurance companies that don't want to pay for health care through our Cost of Denial series at NBC News. We've heard through so many other situations where people have lost their homes and other things just trying to get health care. That being said, the president, because he doesn't have an exact plan, it's hard to say whether or not he sees that as sort of connected to his promise to bring down costs, even though, of course, the president was elected on that big promise of making America more affordable to Americans. So White House officials in some ways connect these issues, but also because there's no plan, it's hard to say whether or not the president really sees this in the same vein as he sees gas prices or grocery prices, Ryan.
Yeah, and we did hear Secretary Bessent say that they're not going to repeat the mistakes of the Biden administration. But in the face now of several weeks of bad polling on the economy, is there anyone at the White House urging a shift in messaging around affordability?
It's an interesting one because at one point you did hear the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, sounding a bit like the Biden administration when they were essentially trying to tell Americans, no, things aren't as bad as you think they are. Ignore the numbers that we're seeing, even though we have concrete evidence that the cost of living on a number of fronts has gone up with Americans and gone up for Americans. That being said, the messaging right now at the White House is we're going to be working on it. Give us a little bit of time. But they're not, I think, at the point where they're saying don't believe your eyes anymore. But I think that messaging shift is also sort of changing day to day because the president in some ways is changing his mind day to day when he's looking at numbers and polling and also just thinking about sort of ways to messages to his biggest supporters. Right.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue now. Sahil, what has been the reaction to these reports of a health care plan on Capitol Hill? Some Republicans have been against the extension of these subsidies. Does the suggestion coming from the administration ease their concerns?
Well, Ryan, it was President Trump who famously said in 2017 that nobody knew health care could be so complicated. 8 years later, he is still struggling on this issue. Now, first things first, Republican leadership on Capitol Hill was not expecting a policy drop from the White House on health care. At least they weren't told that it was coming. So this is a very fluid situation still. And no, nobody's concerns are really going to be eased until they see what the White House has in mind here. One of the reasons that the White House is struggling so much on this issue is that Republicans are deeply divided about what to do on health care with this cliff emerging. There are some Republicans who want to unravel the ACA entirely, move the entire pot of funding, hundreds of billions of dollars, toward other matters. There are others who say just take the expiring funds, about $35 billion a year, and move them into things like flexible savings accounts or HSAs. Yet other Republicans say do a one-year extension of the ACA funding, maybe a two-year extension of the ACA funding, maybe with strings attached. You've got President Trump saying do direct cash payments, which is not going to be viable to a number of Republicans out here. This all comes in the context of them knowing for an entire year that this cliff was coming at the end of December, and they would be facing sharp premium hikes, or dealing with Americans, rather, who are facing sharp premium hikes all over the country if they don't have a solution. They said it was not a September problem when it was a September problem, because that's when insurance companies were setting rates. So it's been a struggle up and down the board here in terms of figuring this out. And Ryan, there is no policy leader here on Capitol Hill who has the juice to really bring the party along and make these difficult trade-offs that they have to make in order to settle on a solution.
But this also puts Democrats in a bit of a spot, right? Because they made subsidies, the extension of these subsidies, the center of their shutdown demands. If the president's willing to give on this a little bit, aren't they forced to come to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Democrats are in wait-and-see mode in terms of, what, if anything, the White House is going to put out here. Take a look at this statement from Senator Maggie Hassan, the New Hampshire Democrat, one of the most moderate in the chamber. She would be the tip of the spear for any deal. She initially did vote with her party on shutting down the government, but then voted to reopen it. She says that they're waiting to see what exactly the president will put forward. And she says, quote, "While I have significant concerns about some of the ideas reportedly in the president's proposal, it nonetheless represents a starting point for serious negotiations," end quote. Now, she does say that she's worried about any issues about repealing the ACA and its protections for pre-existing conditions. You're going to hear a lot about this, Ryan, from Democrats, because what the Republican proposals do is take some money out of the ACA and send them directly to people, some kind of flexible savings accounts or HSAs. But a lot of those people, especially if they're young and healthy, could just take that money and not buy insurance. They could get out of the risk pool, which would mean costs go up for sicker people and older people. That's where you're going to hear Democrats saying it's going to indirectly harm pre-existing conditions. So there's a big fight coming down the road if this happens. Last point on this, Ryan, a Democratic aide I spoke to reminded me that we reported at NBC News just a few weeks ago that many Republicans on Capitol Hill are demanding stricter abortion restrictions on ACA funding in order to have any kind of extension. That's not going to fly with Democrats. That's one of those things that could make the entire concept a non-starter.
I mean, Sahil, under the best case circumstances, this sort of dramatic health care overhaul takes years, not just weeks. Is there any way they can get this done before December 31st?
Anyway, procedurally, yes. You write a bill, you put it on the floor, and you pass it. You can do that in a matter of weeks. But realistically, practically, to get a major healthcare solution done, I've been following this issue up here on Capitol Hill for 15 years, Ryan. That would be by far the fastest I've ever seen anything come together and get to the floor, let alone pass. The big thing Republicans have to figure out here is how to balance the 3 C's of healthcare policy: cost, coverage, and care. They have not settled on a theory of the case that they're willing to put policy on and stand on business with politically. Democrats have that. It's the ACA. They want to put everyone in the same risk pool, spread coverage as wide as possible, and try to lower costs for the people who need it the most, the sickest and the oldest, essentially have the young and healthy subsidizing them. But Republicans, as I keep saying, are all over the map here. They have not come up with a theory, and I would be extremely shocked if they managed to figure that out and put a bill to paper that can pass by the end of the year.
Okay. Yamiche, Sahil, thank you both for that. Let's talk to one of these decision makers right now. Joining me, Utah Republican congressman and someone who uniquely is aware of how healthcare works in this country because he is a physician, and that is Congressman Mike Kennedy. Congressman and doctor, thank you so much for being here. I want to first start with these reports that the White House is set to announce its own healthcare proposal. Have you or any of your fellow Republicans on the Hill seen those details?
CNN has a story about
I haven't seen those details yet, Ryan, but thanks for having me on, and I'm eager to see those and work through this important issue. The reality is Obamacare has been, over the past 15 years, a disaster financially. We saw with the Schumer shutdown, $1.5 trillion demand associated with the Affordable Care Act, and it's obviously not the Affordable Care Act, it's the Unaffordable Care Act. So I'm eager, along with my Republican colleagues, including Brett Guthrie, who's the chair of Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a big part associated with healthcare debates, to analyzing what the president has to say and working that through the Congress in the way that we do in transparency in committees and in debates.
Okay, so you have made it clear that you're not a fan of the Affordable Care Act. If the president's proposal does include an extension of the ACA subsidies for maybe 2 years, but would do things like capping eligibility or provide an option for part of that tax credit to be distributed to healthcare savings accounts, is that at least the beginning of a framework that you could get behind and negotiate around?
I'm a big fan of health savings accounts. The reality is when people are in control of their own money and also in control of their own health care, then they make better decisions. I've sat in the office as a primary care doctor with people that are on high deductible plans that have HSAs that their employer contributes to, or in this case, the government would contribute to. And these people ask me if the requesting, the blood tests, the stress tests associated with heart testing. They ask me questions about how much it's going to cost prior to engaging in these tests. And I, with them, we have a cost decision-making process. And I tell them, well, this is a test that's essential, and this is estimated how much it will cost. And this test is maybe not as essential. And bringing them into that conversation, I think, is a vital part of cost containment. It actually allows good quality health care, too, because imagine when you're interacting with your doctor and your insurance company, and you're incentivized. You get a $50 donation or contribution to your health savings account, and for doing things like mammograms or colonoscopies, which it's hard to do these preventative care things, or you get $100 HSA contribution associated with coming in for your preventative physical. That puts the patient in charge of their own health care instead of waiting for some government bureaucracy to say that this is how we should go about things. So I'm eager to actually see what kind of policies we can put into place that are going to incentivize people to not only care about their own health care and have the right sort of incentives associated with their own health care, but also the costs associated with that health care. When you have a third-party payer and the people, the doctor and the patient are disengaged from that cost process, that's why we have $1.5 trillion demand associated with the Schumer shutdown and these Obamacare subsidies, which are not, there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse associated with what's happening right now.
So I think there's a key part of what you described there, though, and that is that the folks that would take advantage of these health savings accounts would also still be a part of the deductible plan. How concerned are you that someone is given this benefit from the government to put in an HSA and then just chooses not to buy any sort of health care and therefore is not contributing to the overall risk pool? Couldn't that drive the cost of health care up even more? Should there be something to compel them to actually still have some sort of backup insurance plan?
I see those people as well, and those people actually come into my office and they're fee for service. They pay at the time of the visit. They use their health savings account. And Ryan, you and I both know through the insurance process that there are ways for us to work on that. High-risk pools, low-risk pools. These young people, many of whom have been signed up for plans, they don't even know what are in there. We estimate there's 35% of the people that are on these Obamacare subsidized plans that are actually not even accessing health care at all. It's either because they don't want to, they don't even know that they have these plans in some cases, and many of them are young and healthy. And the idea that they are the only ones that should have double and triple deductibles and premiums so that they can subsidize older and sicker folks is one of the problems associated with Obamacare. So a high-risk pool would take care of that. It's an insurance program where we would put people with higher subsidies associated with that into the high-risk pools and allow those people to receive the high-quality health care that they need associated with their ailments, while the younger and healthier individuals who may not even access health care as they're younger and in a better physical condition, that those people pay lower premiums and lower deductibles, which would reduce costs for those people.
But what you are talking about is kind of a fundamental shift in the way health care has been provided in this country for quite a long time. Not to say that the policy is bad or good, but right now you're up against a deadline here at the end of the year where 22 million Americans could see their premiums skyrocket. And I understand that you don't agree with the Affordable Care Act as an underlying policy program, but there needs to be a fix to this immediately, not a long-term plan. How concerned are you that what you're discussing, what the White House is discussing, is too little too late? And how do you solve this immediate problem of that huge pool of Americans that are going to see their premiums hike?
Thanks for the question, Ryan. It's an important one for you and your listeners and viewers to attend to. You said 22 million, and we estimate there's about 1 million people that are going to be subject to these possible premium increases. So the reality is 93% of the people on Obamacare subsidies will see no change or little change associated with their programs. So the vast majority of people are actually going to continue to receive the Obamacare subsidies for 15 years that they've been receiving. That 7% or that I'm hearing numbers of 1.3 million people. We need to attend to those people. The lower risk people, these are high deductible plans with HSA contributions that come from the money that we may appropriate from the federal government. And the high risk individuals that may be associated with that, then we need to have a glide path to make sure waste, fraud, and abuse are rooted out. But in addition to that, that these people are still able to access the high quality health care that they need in the middle of. I've taken care of these people. Diabetics, they have a lot of needs, and they're very expensive. expensive sometimes, those needs. And I want to make sure that those people have excellent access to high-quality health care, which I and people like me as doctors have been delivering for many years in the Obamacare process. So there's a way to make this happen. The last thing I'll say, Ryan, and it's disappointing to me as a preventative doctor, is Congress often doesn't do anything until they absolutely have to.
Right, yeah.
So the fact that we've got an end-of-the-year deadline is kind of typical. It's midterms or it's final exam time for a lot of college students. I guess we're just going to, we got 3 weeks in December. Thanks to the Schumer shutdown, we didn't have as much time as we thought we'd have. But there are many good people working on this important issue in a bipartisan fashion. I'm grateful to partner with my Democrat colleagues to find solutions for the people of America.
Well, I don't disagree with you that Congress waits until the last minute as someone who covers the place every single day. But before I let you go, sir, I just want to be very clear. You do not believe that these these enhanced subsidies need to be extended. You think that you can handle that without the extension of those subsidies?
Not without serious reform. We have people reportedly $600,000 a year that they make that are getting these premium subsidies. That is entirely inappropriate. Those people can pay full freight for whatever plans that they want. We have people that are 400% of the federal poverty level or less. Those people need help, and I'm happy to provide it.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, Congressman Kennedy, I appreciate you being here. Have a very happy Thanksgiving, sir, and we'll see you when you get back here to Washington.
Same to you, Ryan. Thank you.
All right. After the break, the Pentagon now investigating Democratic Senator Mark Kelly after President Trump called for him and other Democrats to be thrown in jail for urging military members to refuse illegal orders. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The Pentagon says it's launching an investigation into Arizona Senator Mark Kelly for, quote, serious allegations of misconduct. Last hour, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the White House was supportive of the investigation. Remember, Senator Kelly was one of 6 lawmakers, all of whom served in the military or as intelligence officials, who posted a video last week telling service members to refuse illegal orders.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
Now, in the wake of that video, President Trump accused the lawmakers of seditious behavior, arguing they should be arrested and put on trial. And at one point, he also suggested their comments could be punishable by death. The president this weekend also reposted this AI-generated image of the lawmakers from behind bars, with some in prison pinstripes. Senator Kelly responded to the news of the Pentagon investigation today, writing in a statement, quote, if this is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our job and holding this administration accountable, it won't work. Joining me now is NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Cubie. So, Courtney, probably a lot of people confused by this, and there's 6 lawmakers in the video. Why is it that only Senator Kelly's the target here?
So he's the only one who actually retired from active duty. He retired as a Navy captain after 20 years of service. The others served, 4 of them served in the military in various levels, lower level ranking officers for the most part. And then Alyssa Slotkin, the senator from Michigan, was a CIA analyst and then a DOD official. So he is the only one, because of his status, who is eligible to be recalled. And for any number of reasons, he can be recalled if there's a national emergency, if there's a war and they need people to come back into service. Or in this case, he can be recalled and brought up on Uniform Code of Military Justice charges, including conduct unbecoming, whatever it is that they want to try to throw at him.
And so what does the investigation entail? What's the practical reality of all of this?
So this is going to be a tough one, because the video that you just played there, he repeatedly talks about not following illegal orders. Well, that's the law. As an officer, you take an oath. And essentially, the easiest way to describe it is you are supposed to protect, essentially, junior enlisted people from carrying out illegal orders. So you're supposed to be able to say, hey, what we're being told to do here, that is illegal. We shouldn't do it. So by repeating that, by saying you should not follow an illegal order, that's basically just repeating the law. Now, that being said, there are a couple of sort of catch-all things that they could try to charge him with. They would have to recall him to active duty, and then they would have to, refer charges against him, something like conduct unbecoming, maybe good order and discipline, something like that. These aren't insignificant charges that he could face if, in fact, they were to go through with this. He could do jail time. They could bump him down in rank. They could take away some of his benefits. But the reality is here, the investigation, it's going to be hard for them to find something that is enough for them to actually find charges against him.
And doesn't it also matter here that he's a sitting United States senator? Aren't there protections against what he says in public as a result of that?
No, I mean, what he is saying here in their capacity, every single one of them identified themselves as former or retired military. So they seem to be speaking in that capacity. But no matter what, he can be recalled if he's in a government position like a senator.
But I meant more about the legal grounding they have there. I mean, the speech and debate clause, to a certain extent, doesn't that protect the sitting senator in this capacity?
It does, but even still, what they are saying, I mean, I've spoken with a number of JAGs and retired military attorneys, and what they're saying is basically restating the law, not to follow an illegal order. And that the word illegal is so key here, because when we've heard some of the Trump administration officials and even some of the social media postings today from the Department of Defense, they keep omitting the word illegal, and that's what's really key here.
Okay, Courtney, thank you for that. We appreciate it. Coming up, pushing for peace. The president huddles with his Secretary of State amid signs of progress in ending Russia's war in Ukraine. We have the very latest next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The White House and Ukraine are touting what they're calling meaningful progress following high-level talks in Geneva this weekend to discuss a possible peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. According to U.S. and Ukrainian officials, the two sides drafted an updated framework to the initial 28-point peace plan that had Ukraine making major concessions to Moscow, such as handing over the Donbas region and shrinking its armed forces. While speaking to reporters, Secretary Rubio appeared optimistic that a deal could be close.
It is probably the most productive day we have had on this issue. Maybe in the entirety of our engagement, but certainly in a very long time. But work remains. I can tell you that the items that remain open are not insurmountable. We just need more time than what we have today. I honestly believe we'll get there.
In a post on social media this morning, President Trump also suggested, quote, something good may be happening in those diplomatic efforts, but he didn't provide any new details. Joining me now is NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. He is in Geneva. So, Richard, do we know what kind of progress was made during those meetings in Geneva, and what are the outstanding sticking points?
Two excellent questions, and this time the White House is keeping the draft very close to its chest. If you remember, the initial 28-point plan was criticized ferociously. In Ukraine, it was criticized by European allies of Ukraine, European governments, analysts, academics, all said that what President Trump and his administration were doing was effectively handing Ukraine a list of Vladimir Putin's demands. A few you listed earlier, that Ukraine had to shrink its armed forces, that it had to remain neutral, no NATO, that it had to give up not just Donbas, but all of the provinces along the Russian border, 4 big provinces, including areas that Russian troops have been unable to conquer. Now, there is no longer a 28-page proposal, according to Ukrainian officials. It is shorter. It has been somewhat streamlined after 2 full days of negotiations between the American side and the Ukrainian side here in Geneva. The delegations have now left this city, and now President Zelensky will go and discuss the outstanding issues, the proposal that seems to be have been reached or close to being reached, according to Secretary of State Rubio, directly with President Trump, and President Trump will discuss it directly with Vladimir Putin. So we don't know exactly what the new draft says, but we know the Ukrainians are much more pleased with it and find it much more acceptable than the 28-point plan that they were initially presented with, which many believed was a complete capitulation to Vladimir Putin's demands.
So, Richard, is the sense then that we may actually be getting closer to negotiating an end to the war compared to these previous diplomatic efforts?
It's possible because even with the worst of the drafts from Ukraine's perspective, the 28-point plan that they hated so much and talk in Ukraine that the soldiers wouldn't follow it and that it could be the end of the current government. And it might be the end of the current government. It's not entirely clear that that Zelensky, as popular as he's been throughout the course of this war, will survive the next phase. He might end up being a Winston Churchill type figure, beloved during wartime, not so much when the war is over. But even that plan, which the Ukrainians found so troublesome and loathsome, was about ending the war. Now they've refined that plan to something they think they can work with or advance to the next rounds of negotiations, president to president, Zelensky to Trump, Trump to Putin. Both of these are about ending the war. So it's not that there's a third track here about talking about escalating the war. But how long it takes, I think, is still very much an open question. Maybe by the end of the year, maybe early next year. But Vladimir Putin said that he thought the initial 28 plan would be a good basis for solving the war. Zelensky has now said that this plan has improvements and he's going to take it up with Trump. So it does seem to be heading in the direction of finding an end to this conflict. Yes.
Okay, Richard Engel on the ground for us in Geneva. Richard, thank you for that report. Up next, a perilous moment for the president as his efforts to prosecute his political rivals faces a major setback, and one of his former top allies in Congress calls it quits. All right, welcome back. Let's not waste any time and get right to our panel. Daniela Diaz, congressional reporter for Notice. Joel Payne, a Democratic strategist who served as the senior aide to the Hillary for America campaign and served as press secretary for former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Mark Bednar, a Republican strategist and the former head of communications for the former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So, Daniela, let's start where we began our show, and that's with the dismissal of both the criminal indictments against James Comey and Letitia James. Is this a significant blow for the president?
Major blow for the president. I mean, even the administration is still saying that they plan to continue these efforts. Caroline Leavitt saying just momentarily, this is not over. We're planning to continue fighting this. But it's very significant that an effort from this prosecutor was dismissed by another judge, because it is a clear effort from the administration to fight back on, people who have opposed Trump's administration, and it's being dismissed. Even what we saw at the Pentagon investigating Senator Mark Kelly for a separate issue that you were talking about early on in the show. This is a continuing pattern that we're seeing from the Trump administration, and it's unclear where they can really hold the line on what their efforts for their people that oppose their politics.
Right. And Mark, what's significant about Halligan's appointment is that it went outside of Congress, right? She was appointed to this job without congressional input. This isn't the first Trump-appointed U.S. attorney whose appointment's been deemed unlawfully appointed. Does the White House need to change their strategy here? And should they be going with U.S. attorneys that can actually be confirmed by the United States Senate?
Well, ultimately, you talk to Republicans on the Hill or the administration, there are still major questions. Did Letitia James, did she conduct mortgage fraud? Did James Comey lie to Congress? These are reasonable questions that a lot of Republicans, a lot of American citizens are concerned about. And so if there's procedural fouls or procedural mistakes or kind of confusion here or there, that does not address the underlying questions about the legality.
But so wouldn't the solution to that then finding a U.S. attorney that believes it should be investigated and have that U.S. attorney confirmed by the Senate?
Well, we'll see how DOJ approaches with the next steps here, whether the appeal process, how they go about it. But the underlying questions about these two potential defendants, those still remain.
Okay, so Joel, how serious do Democrats or just people who are the president's political enemies need to take these threats? It seems pretty clear that the president just isn't going to give up on this if he has a couple of legal setbacks.
Oh, sure. They're going to be relentless. They're going to continue to weaponize government as they have been. And look, it's interesting. If Donald Trump's whole beef here is, I was targeted with prosecution that was not serious and that was pretty arbitrary, to turn around and do that to other folks actually doesn't seem like he actually is applying the political lesson that he should have learned. Second thing, anything Donald Trump is doing to weaponize government, to politically persecute people, isn't making life cheaper, isn't making life more affordable for people, isn't attacking the core issues that people are actually responding to when anytime anyone asks anything related to public opinion in the country right
Mark,
now.
Nobody
wants them to focus.
I'd like your take on that. Are Republicans focusing on the wrong things, especially ahead of what is going to be a very competitive midterm election?
Well, what the outcome of the legal issues with James and Comey, that's not going to decide the midterm elections. That's not going to decide who controls Congress. It's going to be all about the economy. And of course, once one big beautiful bill results kind of are set into place for the course of the next year, that's when Republicans can really regain the high ground on the economy. You know, wages are outpacing inflation. That's a good thing as far as like money coming back to the states, reshoring of jobs. This is going to be really important for the Republican message going forward.
Okay, let's shift gears, Daniela, and talk about the last 48 hours where we saw a gracious mayor-elect, Zohran Mamdani, in the Oval Office, and then a more combative mayor-elect Mamdani with Kristen Welker on Sunday. Take a listen to this exchange.
So, Mr. Mayor-elect, just to be very clear, do you think that President Trump is a fascist?
And after President Trump said that, I said yes. And
so you do?
And that's something that I've said in the past. I say it today. And I think what I appreciated about the conversation that I had with the president was that we were not shy about the places of disagreement, about the politics that has brought us to this moment.
Do you still believe President Trump is a threat to the democracy?
Everything that I've said in the past, I continue to believe. And that's the thing that I think is important in our politics, is that we don't shy away from where we have disagreements, but we understand what it is that brings us to that table.
I think a lot of people were shaking their heads about the way that those two men were so agreeable in the White House. Is there a part of Donald Trump that appreciates how direct he is? And can Mamdani continue to work with this White House while not upsetting his base at the same time?
I mean, I think we can all agree that what we witnessed on Friday was a very charmed Donald Trump. I mean, he recognized who Mamdani is and his charisma, clearly someone who is a good speaker, great for TV. Those are all things Trump very much appreciates and understands. He even was okay with Mamdani calling him a fascist, saying, interrupting, go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead and say it. And it's obviously we were going to see that just one meeting with the president was not going to change the mayor-elect's opinion of the president. But it's clear when he was going into this meeting, he said, I'm just here to really deliver on New Yorkers. Trump is a New Yorker. He probably understands that. It's still such a mind-boggling meeting what we witnessed, but we all had our predictions for how that was going to turn out, and that was certainly one of mine.
But Joel, there is a difference between campaigning and governing, right? Was this and the president recognizing that they're going to have to govern together on some level?
I think these are two iconoclasts who were sizing each other up and who were seeing a lot of, honestly, similar qualities in each other. Donald Trump, independent political power base, separate of the establishment of his party. Zohran Mamdani, independent political power base, separate of the establishment of his party. Many other things that these two men share in common beyond the obvious, right? And I actually think it's not too surprising to me that Donald Trump was actually able to see some things about Zohran Mamdani that he admired. I think where Mamdani will be tested here is not on all the rhetoric politically that he's been able to use in his campaign and up till now, but how he's going to govern. And part of his strategy was to figure out, how can I govern effectively with Donald Trump breathing down my neck from the White House?
Yeah, but on the other side of this, Mark, you have congressional Republicans in districts in Wisconsin, where you're from, in Iowa, in Texas, that are tying the Democrats to Mamdani. If you have this optics of the president bear hugging him in the Oval Office, how do you effectively send this message that, you know, Democratic Congressman X in Iowa is going to come and turn your state into a socialist haven?
Well, I think everyone around this table can agree that the sort of the kumbaya moment that we saw in the Oval Office, that might not last throughout the duration of this election cycle. And so Republicans throughout the country, they're still going to be able to find their shots to be able to exemplify Mamdani's policies as something that they don't want their districts to turn into. So I think that, you know, that moment will dissipate and they'll get right back into campaign mode.
I was just going to say real quick, I think we're going to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene really
briefly. I was going to say we're contractually obligated.
I was just going to say really quickly, part of the beef that she was talking about in her exit video, talking about resigning from Congress, was this idea that Donald Trump kind of did not really come true on all the things that he talked about when he talked about America First and the MAGA. And I actually think the conversation we're having here is maybe a little bit what she was getting at, is that you campaign and you talk so negatively about these things that I think that we believe in, and then you actually don't act on that. You go and get crypto money. You go and kiss up to foreign nationals and put American service people in harm's way. and it didn't line up to what Marjorie Taylor Greene's understanding of what MAGA was. And I actually think that the Zohran meeting, it's a very interesting, kind of cross-section of what she's talking about.
All right, Danielle, I'm going to let you have the last word on MTGE. Is this sending shockwaves through Capitol Hill? Are people not surprised? I mean, she is somebody who often will make impulsive moves like this. This is the most grand impulsive move. Is she exiting in the stage, or have we not seen the last of Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I don't think we've seen the last of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, it's clear that she plans to be a voice in whether it's the Republican Party, because she hasn't been really sounding like a Republican lately. Even Democrats are trying to find a way to work with her because of how she's taken the stance on the Affordable Care Act subsidies, fighting against Trump, the Epstein files. But it's clear that she's truly trying to be her own, sorry to use this word, maverick voice in this party. And you were not surprised, Ryan. You spoke to a ton of people who were not surprised. I remember your reporting, and I was surprised, but I don't think she's going anywhere.
Okay. All right, quickly, 10 seconds. What do you have for Thanksgiving?
I love mashed potatoes.
Mashed potatoes? No,
Take out.
I'm told I'm not allowed to talk about it. Stop. Keep that for tomorrow. We're going to be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press. Now, we're out of time anyway. There's more news ahead on NBC.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.